That faded mark on his wrist looked like nothing more than an old mistake. The group of college students at the corner booth snickered quietly, nodding toward the elderly man sitting gallowned by the window. He was maybe 75, thin and weathered, wearing a threadbare flannel shirt that had seen better decades. His left wrist bore what appeared to be a crude, homemade tattoo, a simple anchor with something. That might have been a trident, so faded it was barely visible. He said nothing to their whisperedcoments, just slowly stirring his black coffee with a trembling hand. But 20 minutes later, a young man in civilian clothes walked through the door, and when his eyes locked onto that seemingly worthless tattoo, the entire diner fell into absolute silence. Would you have recognized what that mark really meant, or would you have walked past like everyone else? Tuesday afternoon at Murphy's Dinner in Coronado, California. The lunch rush had died down, leaving scattered tables of locals and a few tourists who'd wandered in from the nearby beach. In the corner booth by the large window sat Harold Hank Morrison, a man whose 76 years showed an every line on his weathered face, his hands scarred and gnarled from decades of manual labor, wrapped around a ceramic mug that had gone cold 20 minutes ago. He wore the same outfit. I bet he's never been within 1,000 miles of a real military base. That thing on his wrist looks like a child drew it. Their laughter wasn't loud, but it was sharp enough to cut through the ambient noise of the diner, sharp enough for Harold to hear every word. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but he didn't turn around. He'd heard variations of this conversation more times than he could count over the past 30 years, since his hair had gone completely white and his body had started betraying the decades of punishment it had endured. The waitress, Maria, had been working at Murphy's for 15 years. She'd served Harold his black coffee and wheat toast every Tuesday at exactly 2:15 p.m. for the past 5 of those years. She knew he always sat in the same booth, always ordered the same thing, always left a $5 tip on a $3 tab, and never, ever talked about why he came here on this specific day each week. She approached the college students' table with their check, her expression professional but cool. "You all ready to settle up?" The lanky kid was still chuckling about something. "Yeah, we're good. Hey, you know that old guy over there? What's his deal? He comes in here pretending to be some kind of war hero or something." Maria's pen stopped moving across her order pad. She looked at Harold, then back at the students. "That man pays his tab, minds his own business, and treats everyone with respect. Maybe you should try doing the same." "Come on," the girlfriend said. "We're just having fun. That tattoo is obviously fake. Look at it. It looks like something you'd get at a carnival." Maria walked away without another word, but not before Harold caught her eye. He nodded slightly, a small gesture of appreciation that she'd stood up for him. It wasn't the first time she'd done it, and he suspected it wouldn't be the last. What the college students didn't know, what nobody in that diner could have known unless they'd lived through the same hell, was that Harold Morrison's tattoo had been etched into his skin on a beach in Vietnam in 1969. Not by some carnival artist or amateur with a safety pin, but by a Navy corpsman named Danny Chen using a Makish tattoo gun, built from a ballpoint pen, a guitar string, and a small motor salvaged from a broken radio. The tattoo wasn't just an anchor with random lines. It was a Badwiser, the special warfare insignia of the Navy SEALs. The anchor represented the Navy. The trident represented the sea. The pistol represented land. The eagle represented air. And the 4 elements together represented a warrior who could fight anywhere, anytime, under any conditions. But this particular version was different, special. The 7 men who'd earned their Badwisers together in Bud or S-Class 42 had modified the traditional design slightly. Danny Chen had added a small star between the eagle's wings and the trident's center prong. It was their way of honoring Tommy Rodriguez, the 8th member of their tight-knit group, who died during Hell Week when his shit gave out during a particularly brutal surf torture session. Harold and 6 other men carried that exact tattoo, or rather, Harold and what remained of the others. By his last count, only 3 of them were still alive, and he hadn't spoken to either of the other survivors in over a decade. The tattoo had faded not just from age and sun exposure, but from the shrapnel that had torn through Harold's left arm during a classified operation. In the Mekong Delta in 1971, the Navy surgeons had done what they could, but some of Think had been literally blown out of his skin and replaced with scar tissue. What had once been a crisp, proud symbol of elite military service now looked like exactly what those college kids thought it was, a mistake made by someone trying too hard to look tough. Harold took another sip of his cold coffee and checked his watch. 2:45. Tommy Rodriguez would have been 77 years old today. Every year, on Tommy's birthday, Harold came to Murphy's Diner because it reminded him of a little place in Saigon where the unit used to grab coffee when they had a few hours of down to Met Bean missions. The owner there, an old Vietnamese man named DUC, made the strongest coffee Harold had ever tasted. Coffee strong enough to wake the dead, Tommy used to say. The diner's door chimed. As someone new walked in, Harold didn't look up. He was lost in a memory of monologuing at something ridiculous, his whole face lighting up with kind of joy that only young men facing death every day could truly appreciate. Tommy had been the joker of their group, the one who could find something funny in any situation, no matter how dire. The newcomer was a man in his early 30s, wearing civilian clothes, but carrying himself with the unmistakable bearing of military personnel. His haircut was regulation, short, his posture perfect, his eyes constantly scanning the room, in the way that active duty servicemen never quite managed to turn off, even on their days off. His name was Marcus Webb, and he was currently on a 72-hour leave from Naval Amphibious Base Coronado, where he served as an instructor for SEAL candidates going through the most grueling phase of their training. Marcus had grown up in Coronado. His father had been a Navy helicopter pilot, and Marcus had spent his childhood watching SEALs train on the beaches near his house. He'd known from the age of 8 that he wanted to earn his trident, and he'd spent 15 years making that dream come true. Now, at 32, he was one of the younger instructors at the base, responsible for teaching new candidates the mental fortitude required to survive missions that would break most people. He'd come to Murphy's Diner because his grandmother had always brought him here when he was a kid. She'd passed away 6 months ago, and he found himself coming here whenever he needed to feel connected to family, to home, to something larger than the constant intensity of his work. Marcus ordered a coffee and a sandwich from Maria, then chose a table near the window where he could watch late afternoon traffic on Orange Avenue. As he settled into his seat, his eyes swept the room. Out of habit, cataloging exits, assessing potential threats, noting the positions of other patrons. It was a behavior so ingrained that he barely realized Ed was doing it anymore. That's when he saw the old man in the corner booth. More specifically, that's when he saw the tattoo on the old man's left wrist. Marcus had spent enough time around Navy SEALs, both active and retired, to recognize the Budweiser insignia even when it was faded, damaged, or partially obscured. But this wasn't just any Budweiser. This was something he'd only heard about in whispered conversing between the oldest instructors at the base. The modified version that Class 42 had worn, the version with Tommy Rodriguez's star. Marcus had heard the legend of Class 42 since his first day at Bud or S training. They were spoken about the way other people talked about mythical figures. 8 men who'd started together, lost one during training, and then the 7 survivors had gone on to complete some of the most dangerous classified missions of the Vietnam War. Their exploits were the stuff of SEAL legend, stories passed down from instructor to candidate, in the oral tradition that kept the community's history alive. But Marcus had never expected to see any of them in person. According to the stories he'd heard, most of Class 42 had died in Vietnam. The few who'd made it home had scattered the winds, disappearing into civilian life and rarely, if ever, talking about their service. Marcus stared at the tattoo for a long moment, his sandwich forgotten. He'd studied enough military history to know that Thiemann sitting in that corner booth wasn't some wannabe with a fake tattoo. This was the real thing. This was a ghost made flesh, a legend sitting alone with a cup of cold coffee and memories that most people couldn't begin to imagine. The college students were still making quiet jokes, still stealing glances at Harold and snickering. They had no idea they were looking at a man who had killed enemy combatants with his bare hands, who had called in airstrikes while under heavy fire, who had carried wounded teammates.